UFC 309, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic at Madison Square Garden is only a couple weeks away. It goes down on November 16th. And I wish I could say, oh, I'm so hyped for this card. I wish I could say, oh, this is such a great card. I can't wait. But in reality, UFC 309 is a complete and utter disgrace. It is a two-fight main card. In the main event, Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, I literally can't stand. I literally can't stand. And for once, I'm not in the minority on this one. I think a lot of people will back me up on this one. So in this video, we're going to discuss the full pay-per-view main card. We'll discuss every fight on the pay-per-view. We'll touch on the prelims a little bit. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to use this as my grading video. I'll grade UFC 309 on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 being the greatest pay-per-view of all time. 1 being the worst pay-per-view I've ever seen. Let's jump right into it. So UFC 309, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight title. It's not a horrible main event, and we'll talk about the main event in depth in a second. But if you look at the entire card, it's not great. Co-main event and the best fight on the card, in my opinion, is Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Then the featured fight on the card, Viviane Araújo versus Karine Silva, which I have a suspicion they'll probably swap with the fourth fight down the card, Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig. I think that'll be the featured fight on the card. And then opening up the main card, you have Chris Weidman versus Eryk Anders. Now, before we rip into the main card, because that's exactly what I'm going to do, let's talk about the prelims. Featured prelim, Nikita Krylov, Azamat Murzakanov. Actually love that fight. Great prelim. This is like the perfect fight to headline the prelims or open up a main card. Honestly, you swap this out with Chris Weidman, it probably, I don't know, I don't want to say it substantially increases the value of the main card, but to me, it's a decent, increase for the quality of the main card. And it's on the prelims. And then Jonathan Martinez and Marcus McGee is a really solid bantamweight fight. I want to highlight those two fights because if you're kind of a casual or you're kind of like half in, half out, you may not realize these are two banger fights actually. So the prelims, I can't complain too much about the prelims. And another prelim that I really want to highlight, Basil Hafez, Oban Elliott. Great fight as well. But we're not here to talk about the prelims, okay? And either way, those fights are outside of the Nikita Krylov fights. They are prelims. They deserve to be on the prelims. Let's talk about the main card. Opening up the main card, we have Chris Weidman, otherwise known as Chris Weidman, versus Eryk Anders. How do I put this? How do I describe Chris Weidman? You know what? He's a bitch. Chris Weidman's a bitch. I'll say it. I'll say what everyone's thinking. And I know people are going to be like, Joey, how dare you disrespect the All-American former middleweight champion Chris Weidman? You know what? Fuck him. Chris Weidman brutally fingered Bruno Silva so badly in his last fight that Bruno Silva couldn't take no more. Non-consensual fingering from Chris Weidman had Bruno Silva laying on the ground in agony. The referee had to stop the fight and then decide to go to a technical decision because Chris Weidman had brutally eye-poked him knuckle deep so bad countless times throughout the fight. I did an in-depth breakdown on this. I think he poked him 6 times. The finishing shot was a double eye poke, okay? And not only that, Chris Weidman's a scumbag for eye-poking him that many times. But then after the fact, he went on a media tour. No, actually, let's take a step back. Let's rewind. After the fact, he celebrated like he won the Super Bowl. Then after that, he went on a media tour and he blamed Bruno Silva. Instead of saying, you know what, I really feel bad about it. I poked him so many times. He said, yeah, of course. Why would he fall to the ground like that? You poked him so many times. I hope Eryk Anders comes out with an Edward Scissorhand technique in this fight. I hope he eye gouges Chris Weidman 17 times and the referee doesn't do shit about it. But you take that away from Chris Weidman. You forget about that for a second. Let's forget about his unsportsmanlike conduct throughout the course of his career. Because let's not forget, when Anderson Silva broke his leg in half, Chris Weidman draped the American flag over himself and pranced around the octagon celebrating. And then after that, he was taking pictures with fans checking leg kicks, okay? Man has a catastrophic injury, and then Chris Weidman does that. But I guess, karma already paid him back for that. And I finally forgave Chris Weidman for that when the whole Uriah Hall thing happened, which was actually terrible to happen to Chris Weidman. But you take all that away, and you really just look at him as a fighter. He is a dead body. Chris Weidman's a dead body. Let's pull up his resume right now. Okay, he beat Bruno Silva via eye poke. That doesn't even count. He should have lost that fight. Lost to Brad Tavares. Lost to Uriah Hall. Beat Omari Akhmedov, which Omari Akhmedov isn't that good. And he looked horrible in this fight, to be honest. Lost to Dominic Reyes. Lost to Jacare Souza. Beat Kelvin Gastelum. Lost to Gegard Mousasi. Lost to Yoel Romero. Lost to Luke Rockhold. Basically, ever since he lost to Luke Rockhold, he's been a dead body. That's still my boy. Man, he took a lot of damage in that fight. And let's see, how many KO losses does he have? One, two, three, four, five, six KO losses in like his last 10 fights. I'm not even counting how many fights it is because it was so many. So he gets the win against Bruno Silva, who's checked out himself. Bruno Silva just lost a fight. And, you know, what's there to really care about a Chris Weidman fight anymore? He's washed up. He broke his leg, had catastrophic injury against Uriah Hall after all these brutal KOs. So not only was he not there before he broke his leg, you think he's even remotely close to what he was before he broke his leg? Which was he was already a bum. He was already a dead body at that point, getting KO'd by anyone and everyone. And on top of that, he has a curse every time he fights in New York. I believe the Jacare Souza was in New York, UFC 230, got KO'd there. The Yoel Romero fight was in New York, got brutally KO'd there with a flying knee. And yeah, Chris Weidman's a dead body. He's fighting Eric Anders. I'm not even sure what kind of streak Eric Anders is on right now. I don't remember off the top of my head, so let's actually pull that up. He's on a one-fight, he's on a one-fight winning streak. He beat Jamie Pickett. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think it was anything good. You know, these are all grappling matches here. But he fought Jamie Pickett, beat Jamie Pickett, who's a dead body. The fact that he went to decision with Jamie Pickett's an embarrassment. Before that, lost to Marc-Andre Barriault. Before that, beat Kyle Dawkins, who's, you know, a bum, and I don't think he's in the UFC anymore. Either way, Eric Anders isn't a very good fighter, okay? Let's be honest. He's kind of like a, you know, I wouldn't even say he's a journeyman. He's like your... maybe a step off the bottom of the barrel for UFC fighters nowadays, and that's really saying something. He's decent, but yeah, this is not a good fight, and this is not a fight worthy of a pay-per-view main card. And yeah, it's a horrible fight. Next fight on the card. Okay, let's move on from Chris Weidman's bum ass. We have Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig. What's there to say about this fight? I don't hate this fight, but Bo Nickal is the epitome of the hold me back guy. He talks about, oh, I would have stepped in on short notice and fought Robert Whittaker, but I was out in the woods and I didn't have any service. And look at Khamzat. He got deathly ill and went to the hospital. That would never happen to me. Meanwhile, he's a spoiled brat. And what do I mean by that? You look at Bo Nickal's resume, okay? He fights nothing but scrubs, okay? Nothing but scrubs. Paul Craig, let's open Paul Craig's resume up, okay? Paul Craig got brutally KO'd by Caio Borralho. Fight before that, got finished by Brendan Allen. His last win was against Andre Muniz, which, okay, that's okay. Before that, KO'd by Johnny Walker. Before that, lost to Volkan Ozdemir. He doesn't have a good win since Nikita Krylov in 2022, which actually isn't a bad win, to be honest. Nikita Krylov is still doing decent. But let's be honest, they're just feeding Paul Craig a dead body. Or they're feeding Bo Nickal a dead body in Paul Craig. That's what they're doing. Look at Bo Nickal's resume. Cody Bumditch doesn't even belong in the UFC. Val Woodburn doesn't even belong in the UFC. Jamie Pickett, we just talked about, he lost to Eric Anders, doesn't even belong in the UFC. I don't even think he is in the UFC anymore. These guys are straight up scrubs. They're just offering him grocery store cashier after grocery store cashier after grocery store cashier. And Paul Craig is essentially the toughest test of his career. And Paul Craig has no hands and he has no chin. The only thing he has is a submission threat. And sure, has he used that before? And could he expose Bo Nickal, which would be absolutely hilarious? Yes. But this shouldn't be on the main card. Bare minimum, this should be opening up the main card. This is a better fight than Weidman versus Anders, but only because, okay, Bo Nickal's going to have to use his striking in this fight, but Paul Craig's boxing, I don't even know what to compare it to. I want to say Ronda Rousey, but they used to hype up her striking like it was crazy good, but it wasn't. Paul Craig has horrible hands. He has horrible striking. He needs to just sub you on the ground with a Hail Mary sub. And could that happen against Bo Nickal? Sure, but outside of that, Bo Nickal just talks and talks and talks and talks. I would destroy Khamzat. I would be a negative 1,000 favorite against Khamzat. I would beat this guy and I would beat that guy. But instead of asking for those types of guys, instead of campaigning for those types of guys, instead of the UFC saying, you know what, Bo Nickal's ready. He's almost 30 years old. He's a grown man. Let's push him to the top. You know, we obviously want to get behind him. Now he's just going to fight scrub after scrub after scrub. And say what you will, and be like, Joey, he's, you know, the UFC are obviously building him. Yeah, they were building Khamzat too, and guess what they did? They threw him in against Leon Edwards. So, and the only reason I keep bringing up Khamzat is because Bo Nickal does. So I don't really care for this fight that much. It's an okay fight, but it has no business being, you know, heavily onto the main card. Next fight on the card, we have Viviane Araújo versus Karine Silva. This fight is about as good as Josh Thompson's analysis on Khamzat Chimaev, okay? I don't mean to keep bringing up Khamzat in this video. I mean, Karine Silva is an interesting prospect in the division. Viviane Araújo is a decent vet. But main card? This is like a a nightmare last-minute Apex main event that everyone cries about as an Apex main event. Featured fight on the card. I believe they will sub this out with Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig, moving it up the card. But seriously, Viviane Araújo, and I'm not one of these women's MMA haters, okay? I'm not even going to say that much about this fight. Karine Silva is mildly exciting. This is a decent fight in the division. But pay-per-view main card MSG? If you've been a fan for a long time, you know the MSG cards are supposed to be prestigious. This is a garbage fight. And this is the featured fight on the card. Let's move on to the next fight because I don't even want to talk about this fight. We have Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. When I said I didn't want to talk about this fight, I was talking about the last fight, just so you know. The way it came out sounded weird. That's why I paused there. This is the best fight on the card. Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler 2. This is going to be exciting. This is truly going to be exciting. Michael Chandler, he's returning. A lot of fans may not even know who Michael Chandler is. He sat out for damn near 3 years waiting on Conor McGregor. He left his family in January with one dude on his mind, was going to WWE and saying, Conor McGregor, get your candy ass back in the octagon. And now he's finally accepted the fact, okay, I got to fight someone else. Now he's fighting Charles Oliveira, who's coming off a loss against Arman Tsarukyan, where he got, beaten up. And, I know a lot of people said it was close, but he got taken down and controlled and beaten up a little bit. He lost the fight pretty clearly, in my opinion. But Charles is still a top flight lightweight. Michael Chandler, and I'll open up his resume real quick. I mean, when's the last time he's done anything? He lost to Dustin Poirier back in November of 2022. His last win's against Tony Ferguson. Then he lost to Justin Gaethje, lost to Charles Oliveira, beat Dan Hooker, which has aged quite well, but I think Dan Hooker would whoop his ass nowadays. So he's taken a tough test in Charles Oliveira, and we'll have to see how he is. He's been posting photos online. He looks to be in great shape. He always has power. He's always explosive. Charles is hittable, but so is Chandler. It's a rematch of one of the best fights, one of the best vacant title fights I've ever seen that only lasted 2 rounds, where Chandler almost got him out of there in the first round, and then Oliveira came back and finished him in the second round with a left hook. So it's a great fight. It's super exciting. This is the real main event. And at the end of the day, this is 2 guys coming off losses. Supposedly, this is a number 1 contender fight. If it wasn't for Islam kind of cleaning out the division, if he does beat Arman, I don't think this should be a number 1 contender fight. I don't think Chandler should earn a title shot. Oh, he beat one guy. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. We're giving him a title shot now, but ultimately, I think he probably could. And I know Chandler, if he wins, he's going to do some corny call out afterwards about Conor McGregor again. It's like, Conor McGregor, I've been searching to eat your candy ass for the last couple years. Don't be scared, homie. That's probably something Chandler will pull off. I'm happy Chandler's finally getting back in the cage. If you guys know me, I was heavily criticizing Chandler for not stepping in the cage and instead wasting his career and wasting his training camps. I mean, he should be in great shape. He's trained like 17 camps for this fight. I mean, this is a 3-year training camp for Charles Oliveira. So, ultimately, I love watching Charles Oliveira fight. I love watching Michael Chandler fight. The first fight was incredible. It was for a vacant title. Charles Oliveira came out on top. I don't know why I'm stumbling over my words in this fight. And I think it should be a banger. I really don't have any crazy criticisms for this fight. This is a perfect co-main event for an MSG card. It's going to deliver no matter what. So I really can't criticize this fight. This is my favorite fight on the entire card. This is the people's main event. Let's be honest. It is. It is a great fight. But let's talk about the main event. The main event and what I really want to get to. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic. Guys, you are not going to believe this. If you're a newer fan, you're probably like, oh, who's Stipe Miocic? I haven't seen him. Stipe Miocic has not won a fight since, I believe, 2019. No, 2020. I believe it was late 2020. Let's pull it up. I believe it was late 2020 against Daniel Cormier. Let me take a look. Yeah, August 15th, 2020. This was the same night that Sean O'Malley got his legs brutally chopped. Then he was shucked to the ground, flash KO with brutal ground and pound elbows, and then stretchered out of the cage with no serious injuries against Marlon Chito Vera. That's how long ago this fight was. That is his last win. His last fight was in March of 2021. He got folded like a lawn chair against Francis Ngannou and has sat out answering phones at the fire department for the last 4 years. I mean, that is insane. We are almost on 4.5 years since he last won a fight. 4.5 years since he last won a fight. I have not, let's put it this way. I have not had my channel since Stipe Miocic last fought. Let's see. So he fought in March. I started my channel like a week after Stipe's last loss. And then you have Johnny Bones Jones, who has one win in the last 4 years against Cyril Gahn. I do believe Jon Jones is the GOAT of the sport. I do not believe he is pound for pound number one. I don't know how you can, attribute a pound for pound number one status to a guy who has one win in 4 years. We don't know truly where he's at. Okay, did he win the title? Sure. But he's been inactive, and I know he had an injury. But Jon Jones should truly be fighting Tom Aspinall. And instead he's fighting Stipe Miocic. Nobody wants to see this fight. Is this still a decent fight? Is this fight still pretty interesting just because you have Jon Jones, considered the GOAT of the sport, fighting the GOAT heavyweight in Stipe Miocic in some people's eyes? Yes, it is. But at the end of the day, it should be Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall. Everyone wants to see that fight. Tom Aspinall went out there to start Sergey Pavlovich. Tom Aspinall went out there and beat up Curtis Blades and finished him. And all that time, Stipe just answered phones, saved cats out of the trees. It's just like the UFC is just giving undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot. In what world is it okay to give a guy a title fight when he hasn't won a fight in over 4 years? I just don't think it's okay. Stipe looks like he should be using a walker. When he was at one of the events, he's walking out. He looks like he should be using a walker. So I don't care for this fight. I don't want this fight. And at the end of the day, could it be a good fight? At the end of the day, when we get to the week of the fight, am I going to be mildly excited? Yes. But this is a garbage heavyweight title fight, and I'm sick and tired of undeserved title shots. Tom Aspinall deserves a title fight. If not, why are you giving him an interim belt? And the fact that both these guys may retire afterwards just adds salt into the wound. We're never going to see it. The fact that we have Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall, and Francis Ngannou, and I know Francis Ngannou is no longer in the UFC, but I'm just saying as some MMA heavyweights, and we will never see any of the three of them step inside the cage together, is a complete and utter travesty. It's a disgrace to the sport. And if this fight topped off a stacked card, I'd be okay with it. I'd still have my, gripes, but I'd be like, okay, well, at least we got a pretty solid card underneath of it. But no, they're just basically, say, oh, it's going to sell because Jon Jones' retirement fight, Stipe's retirement fight. Most people probably don't even know who Stipe is. They probably never even heard him talk. If they did, they didn't understand him. So, look, guys, UFC 309, I'm not a happy camper. I'm not excited for it. It's a two-card fight. That's really what it is. 2-fight card. I don't know what I'm saying right now. And that's Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, and Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic has lost a lot of steam. It was originally going to happen last summer of 2023. When Jones beat Cyril Gahn, took no damage. There was talks of Jones-Stipe international fight week. I was fine with that. It wasn't the end of the world. But now we're almost 2 years later since that win from Jon Jones. Stipe sat out for even longer, and this is what we're getting. So just one last time, take a look at this main card. Chris Weidman, Eric Anders, Bo Nickal, Paul Craig, Viviane Araújo, Karine Silva, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, and tell me that isn't a complete and utter disgrace. Now, in terms of grading this card, it's got some high-quality fighters on it, at least in the top 2 fights, I believe. But we don't really know. Stipe and Jones have been so inactive, we don't even know. Chandler's been almost as inactive as Stipe, which is even crazier. And then the rest of the card just kind of fights that should be on the prelims. But the UFC is really trying to push some of these fighters. Bo Nickal, cough, cough, spoiled brat, teacher's pet, Dana White's lapdog. If I had to grade this card, look, Jon Jones is one of my favorite fighters to watch, so I do think that adds a little bit to it. Charles Oliveira is one of my favorite fighters to watch. So it's hard to give it like a 1 out of 10. I'll say this card, I'll give it a 3.5 out of 10 just because of the top 2 fights are still pretty compelling, even though I have some massive complaints about the main event. But let me know what you guys think of UFC 309. Are you excited for it? Are you going to watch it? Or are you going to skip it? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.